Hello everyone, I am back and we are going to do some more blocks for my library quilt or my bookshelf quilt. This is a pattern that I'm basing it off of, it's Pat Sloan's, but I'm making some changes, so I made myself a little sketch and drew out how big I needed my blocks to be so that I could make changes where I wanted to. I do want to add like some flowers and stuff on there, so I have this book. It is Lori Holt's, it's Farm Girl Vintage 2. I love this book, it's got so many cute patterns in there. And then it has quite a few flower patterns in there, but my sister's favorite flower is a tulip, so that is what I'm going to be doing. And she luckily had one in here, and it comes in two different sizes, this block. I'm going to be making the smaller version, and only half of it, because I only need one tulip. All right, let's get started. So I've started with grabbing some strips of fabric that I had, and these are not all the same width. I wanted some variety, so I figured I would do some different sizes. If you look at Pat's pattern, her books are all the same width, but I figured books in reality aren't all the same width, so I wanted some that were a little bit thinner and some that were a little bit bigger. So I just cut some random strips here and then some background pieces, just making sure that they will all be longer than what my finished block is supposed to be. And here I fussy cut some text fabric. I figured I could just use that word positive as the label on this one. I just thought that would be a cute little touch and then a little bit of variety, change things up a little bit. I'm just going to chain stitch all my pieces together to the background pieces and put the little labels on there wherever I can. That's the beauty of these blocks. You can just kind of make them your own. You don't have to follow the pattern exactly all the time. That's why I love quilting. So I'm just going to sew these and then I'm going to go and give them a good press. And then I will show you what that looks like once I've sewn that together and how I size them up for my block. All right, they're all sewn. So I'm just going to take the first one or one, and then I'm going to cut it at the height I'm supposed to have it and lay it up to the next one and decide where I want to trim the next piece and what I want it to look like. Do I need to trim on the bottom or just on the top? And just figure it out where as I go. Sometimes these improv quilts turn out to be the best, but sometimes following a pattern is a good idea. So if you're not sure you can do this without following a pattern, then just follow Pat's pattern. It's a great pattern. It looks gorgeous. But I just think my sister would like something with a little bit more variety on there. And here I actually cut one piece too short. I am not sure how that happened, so I will go make a different one. And then I found this cute little floral print that I got from my sister-in-law. She gave me some of her scraps, and I just thought, hey, this would be cute in here. So I think it'll go good with this whole theme that I have going here with the floral prints for the books. So I'm just going to make that and then sew all my strips together. So once I have all of my strips or the books made, I'm just going to sew them together and then I will go and double check to make sure that I have the right size block. If not, I will add, and if I have it too big, then I'll trim it down. And if you're interested in Pat Sloan's book, Holiday Hoopla, where you can find this library quilt, I will leave links to it in the description box below. And same with Lori Holt's Farm Girl Vintage 2. If you're interested in that book, I believe you can get that one at Fat Quarter Shop and on Amazon. So I will leave both of those links in the description box below if you're interested. And if you want to share all your beautiful quilts that you've made or blocks that you're working on or whatever you're doing, I do have a Facebook group. And if you want to join our community over there, you're more than welcome to. I will leave a link to that in the description box below. You'll always find a bunch of links down below. If you're interested in anything, I do link a lot of the tools that I use and where I find my products. So if you're interested, you're more than welcome to use those links. If you don't want to, that is totally fine too. This is my first time making a library quilt, and so far I'm really enjoying it, and I'm loving watching these blocks come together, and I love how easy it is and how scrappy you can go with it, because I have mostly just scraps in my stash, so I need to use that up before I start buying too much other stuff. But it's hard not to buy more fabric because I love it. So here I'm just going to take my ruler and see if it is the correct size as to what Pat Sloan suggests these blocks should be, and some of her blocks are different sizes, just so you know. This one is not as wide as I need it to be, so I'm going to be grabbing another strip of fabric, and I think this one should go good because I do have some blues that I want to put in this quilt, so this will go good with the yellows that I have so far. And this one I think I am going to make some changes and try something new and make the two little labels instead of just the one. So I have another little light fabric here that I'm going to be using. And here again, I am just randomly sewing things together, not really having a desired width or height. And then I added the background piece for the top part. And here I'm just deciding which side I want this book to be on, if I want it to be there or here. And I'm going to go with here. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have this block way too big now, so I'm going to have to trim it down, but that's okay. That's what I wanted. And yes, I actually had it way too big, so I trimmed off quite a bit, and it ended up being a little bit narrower than I would have liked, but oh well. Like I said, that's the beauty of quilting. You can make it your own and just go with the flow. It's your quilt and you can make it however you want and make changes where you need to or you want to. That's one of the things that I love about quilting. All right, so I have this first block all done now that I wanted to make today, and now we are going to move on to the next one. And for that, I'm going to be making half of this block, so just one of the tulips. And again, I'm just using some scrap fabrics that I had lying around. I figured that yellow would look really nice. I have all my pieces cut out here. I can't give you these measurements because it's not my pattern, but it is in the Farm Girl Vintage 2 book if you're interested. Okay, so the pattern says to take fabrics D and then lay those out, and then we need fabric C, and these are tiny little pieces, and I don't know why I keep picking patterns with these tiny little pieces because I struggle with sewing them on. I prefer bigger pieces, but I do love how cute these little blocks turn out to be. So I'm just placing all these little fabric C squares where the pattern is telling me that I need to sew them, and then I'm going to take them over to the sewing machine, sew them on, and then give them a good little press because this is very important here, these tiny little pieces. And my advice is, if you're making these, Lori Holt gives you what each section is supposed to measure when you're done sewing it together. Square up after every single step because it just makes your finished block look so much nicer. I did not take the time to do it here in the beginning, and I really wish I had, because if you square up each section, your end result will look so much nicer. And like I said, I really struggle with these little pieces, so getting them to sit nice, and I always double check before I cut. I did end up having to take this one off and redoing it because it just wasn't lining up, but it's worth it taking the time to do that. Now that I have those sew and flips done, I'm going to do the other ones that the pattern is telling me to do. So I need to put one on that corner and then one on the other corner on the other side, the opposite. And you need to make sure that you're doing them opposite of each other. If you're not sure what a sew and flip is, I will leave a link to that at the end of this video. Here I'm just double checking to make sure that it's going to be going the right way because like I said, we want to make sure that we're not mixing them up because otherwise you're not going to get that tulip to look the way it's supposed to look. And here I'm just making sure that I take extra time to line everything up. And I did draw a line on these. Usually I don't when it's smaller pieces, but I wanted to make sure that this turned out looking nice, so I took the time to draw the lines. And if you enjoy watching these kind of videos, I would really appreciate it if you would give me a thumbs up. That really helps boost these videos and helps my channel, and I do appreciate that so much. Now that we've sewn those together, I'm going to just sew these strips together here, and I'm going to make sure that where my sew and flips are, that those points, that they match up perfectly. And I did not bother pinning it or clipping it here because, you know, I wanted to get it done quickly. Yeah, well, Jack came back because take the time to pin. It's worth it in the end because, as you can see, my point does not line up at all. It's awful. So I'm going to take that apart and then I'm going to redo it, and this time take the time to get a pin and keep it in place. All right, now we have the top of our tulip all done. I squared it up already to make sure that it would be nice and make things easier for later on. So here to make the leaves, I took fabrics F and laid them down and took fabrics A and put them in the corresponding corners as per the pattern. And again, make sure that we don't mix things up. And then I'm also going to be taking fabrics B because we're going to be sewing those onto the bottom of each of those leaves. And then the last one would be fabric E, and that will be our stem portion. So I'm just going to take this all over to my sewing machine and then sew that together. And here, when you're done the leaves, make sure that you're putting them on the right sides before you sew it to the stem, because if you put them the other way, your leaves will end up looking like they're droopy, and it would be a very sad flower. So just make sure that you lay everything out and double check before you sew anything. And then I'm just going to line everything up with the stem and sew the leaves onto the stem, and then we are ready to sew that to the tulip or to the flower part. And then for the flower pot that I'm going to be making for underneath here, I have no pattern for, and I am going to completely and utterly wing it. I didn't bother planning anything out or drawing anything up like I normally do. I figured I'm going to try winging it and see what happens. So hopefully it works out the way I want it to. All right, I have that all sewn together and pressed, and now it's time to sew the tulip onto the stem. And then our little tulip will be all done. And I think it's going to look so cute, and I hope my sister likes it. I should have maybe asked her what color she wanted her tulip to be. I just picked yellow. I don't know why, but I did, and I just thought it would be cute. So we'll see if she likes it. All right, here's my little tulip block. It's all done. I don't know about you, but I really like it. And you could really make this in any color you wanted and make it even scrappier if you wanted to. But I like the way this looked, and now I'm going to try to make a little pot to put underneath here. I'm not sure yet how that's going to work, but we're going to try it. For my pot, I just grabbed a brown piece of fabric. It is measuring 4 by 4. And then I'm just going to cut little angles on there just to give the pot a little bit of a slanted look because I didn't want it to be a square pot. I'm not sure if I'm going to like this height, but we'll try it. And then I have this blue plaid that I'm going to use to make like a little pot topper thingy just to add some color to it. So I'm going to get some background fabric and sew it to either side of my pot, and then we'll see how that works out. And for the background, I think my pieces are like 5 by 5 inches, maybe 5 by 6 or something. I'm not 100% sure, but I just cut them quite a bit bigger so that I would have room to trim. And here I'm just deciding where I want to position the pot part so that I can trim it up later on and get the correct size that I need. And because I'm winging it, it took a little bit of thinking. But I just sewed it on and hoped for the best, I guess, and I did leave myself quite a bit of trimming space so that I would have room to do this. And now I'm just going to trim it so that it is the same width as my tulip. And the height, I trimmed it at 4 inches, the same as I had my pot in the beginning. I'm not sure if I like that height yet. I'm still deciding if I want to trim it down or not. We'll see once I have it kind of done, then I can lay it out. Let me know in the comments if you ever do these improv blocks where you just make it up as you go, or do you always strictly follow a pattern? All right, so I decided that I don't want it that high, so I am going to trim off a little bit, not very much, just a bit. So I'm going to trim it down to about 3.5 inches. Yeah, 3.5 inches is what I trimmed it down to. And then that way it'll be a little bit shorter. I didn't want it too long and skinny. You could leave it at 4 inches, that would be totally fine, but I did want a little bit of more of the background on the top of the tulip because I didn't want it too big. I wanted a small little flower pot in there. And then I just cut this blue plaid fabric to the same width as my block, and then I'm going to sew that on there, and then I'm going to decide if I want to leave that the same height or not, and then trim it. I'm just seriously making this thing up as I go. I don't know, I kind of enjoyed it, but at the same time, sometimes it's better to have a plan. I did decide to cut it a little bit shorter, or narrower, I guess, because, well, I didn't like the way it looked. I figured it might look a little bit too bulky for the short stubby pot that I had made. So I just trimmed off a little bit, and then that way when I sew it on and I lose that 1/4 inch seam allowance, it'll look a little bit better. And now here I'm just adding some white strips to the side of my tulip so that I can make it the same size as my block here because, well, we need that to fit together. I just grabbed strips out of my scrap bin, so it did end up being a little bit too wide, but that's fine. Then I'm just going to trim it down. And I finally remembered to bring my cutting mat back downstairs, and I'm going to be moving all my sewing downstairs into the basement now into my sewing room so that it's all in one place and I'm not always running around looking for different tools all the time. Now that I have that cut to the same width, I'm just going to sew that onto the pot, and then I'm just going to add some background pieces all the way around. And I decided that I didn't like how wide my blue strip was sticking out over the edge of the pot, so I just trimmed everything down a bit more because, well, why not? And then I forgot that I had my rotating mat there, so I just flipped it by hand because I'm a genius. My excuse is I have kids in my sewing room, so they're very distracting sometimes. So yeah, now I'm just going to add some strips to the side, and then I'm going to trim it down to the width that this block is supposed to be, and then I'm going to add a strip to the top and then trim that down to the height that it's supposed to be. And this actually, I believe, ended up being perfect, and I didn't have to do any trimming, which was great. And then I just grabbed another piece of fabric and sewed it to the top so that I could trim it. And all the stuff that I do cut off when I'm trimming, I either put it back in my scrap bin or in some parts center so that I can use it for future projects because I do keep tiny little pieces. And I didn't really have to trim all that much, it was just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to hang up all these blocks that I've made so far for this quilt on my fancy design wall that I made with a piece of batting and some masking tape. These are the 2 blocks that I made last week, and then I'm going to hang up the 2 that I made this week. That way you can see what it's going to look like when it all comes together. You could sew these blocks together already, but I want to wait until I have them all made because I might want to switch things around. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.